Welcome. My name is Steve Nelson. I'm the CEO of Capital Insight Partners here in Scottsdale, Arizona. I'd like to welcome you to the second in our webinar series, Growth Leaders Essentials. We're joined today by Gary Covert, who presented the predominant part of the first webinar. Gary Covert is an executive coach and advisor. He helps CEOs and senior leaders and their teams to be inspiring leaders and to achieve their business objectives quickly and with confidence. I think you got a good taste of the depth and breadth of Gary's expertise and insight last week or at our last webinar. I can tell you personally at our firm, we've used Gary's help a great deal, and he's brought tremendous insight and really helped us accelerate our both efficiency and profitability, and helped us a lot with the team and the people side of the business. So Gary, welcome back to this week's webinar. Before I proceed to introduce Joel, who's going to lead us off today, I wanted to mention a little bit about Meadows Bank. You know, Meadows Bank was founded by Andre Agassi and some others up in Las Vegas. They have a presence here in the Phoenix Valley. I have found them as a community bank to be very really everything that you'd like them to be. They're responsive, they're personable, they care a great deal about service, but what I like most of all about Meadows, I found them to have a can-do attitude. And when you're working with a bank, that's pretty important. Capital Insight Partners is a registered investment advisor based here in Scottsdale. We serve clients in 30 states from Hawaii over to Connecticut and Florida, so we really cover the country. So we help individuals and families of $2 million minimum with everything that comes up. We're considered a multifamily office, so whether it's the investing or financial planning, insurance, anything really that involves money, we can be sort of the CFO for the family. And then on the business side, we help business owners and businesses with their 401k plans, executive comp. So that's who we are. Now, the lead presenter today is Joel Strom, and we are very lucky to have Joel join us. Joel is going to talk, of course, about value creation. That's really the focus of today. And he has a great deal of depth and experience in that. Joel is an advisor to CEOs and the owners of growing businesses. Utilizing his strategic value acceleration process, he helps his clients to maximize enterprise value and to move their business from ordinary to extraordinary. So Joel, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Steve. And we will get going. Welcome everyone to our second Growth Leaders Essential program. And just a note, if you want to, or you have a question, just put it in the Q&A section. Click on that and enter your question in there, and we'll get to it for sure. And it's a little easier doing that than in the chat. So let's get going. So today's program is, yes, it's value creation, but it's what I call value creation leadership lessons that are reconfirmed. And I think that takes a little bit of explaining. So let me give you a little background on that. After about 25 years of consulting and helping my clients and companies grow and create value for their businesses, I had a great opportunity a number of years ago, actually about 5 or 6 years ago, to test that reality as CEO. So I was offered a position to work as CEO of a client company, and it gave me an opportunity to see if everything that I had been telling people for 25 years really worked. And it was a great experience. I reconfirmed a lot of things, and I unconfirmed a number of things. So today's program, we're going to talk mostly about the reconfirmation that I got from a leadership standpoint. Some of them worked, some of them didn't, but today we'll talk about all the positives. So let me give you a little bit more background, and then we'll start on what some of those reconfirmations were. My belief is that as CEO of a company, your number one role, your primary role, is to become that company's chief value officer, or CVO. There's only one person in the company responsible to lead that charge, and that's the CEO or the owner of the business. And when I became CEO of that company, that's the role that I took. I took the CVO role. And I used, as Steve mentioned, the strategic value concept. We have a tool that we use to build value in a company. And it comes from years and years of watching companies grow and become great companies and maximize their enterprise value. And one of the key things about strategic value is that the enterprise value of a company is much more than just the profitability. It goes well beyond that. To maximize enterprise value, you really have to create a great company. And one of the underlying premises of it is that if you're building a great company, you cannot sacrifice long-term value for short-term profits. It just doesn't work. And too many companies, too many CEOs look at just what's happening tomorrow and today, as opposed to what's happening next week, next month, and 3 years from now. You know, public companies are always focused on their quarterly results. And what that does is it shortens that window. It shortens the time that they look at where success can happen and where value can be built. Now, there's some public company CEOs that have done great jobs of looking further out and not worrying as much about the quarterly result and looking at the long-term value of the company. But as owners and CEOs of closely held businesses, we don't have to worry about that. We can look a little further out. I mean, sure, we have to make a profit, but we can look further down the line and not sacrifice that long-term value just to create short-term profitability. So that's part of some of the basics that I went into this position as CEO in my head. And what came out of it, as we'll talk about today, are 12 reconfirmations of some of the practices that as a leader, I implemented in this CEO process. So let's look at the first one. Reconfirmation number one was that leadership really plays a huge role in the success of a CVO. I don't think it's a surprise. It wasn't a surprise to me. It shouldn't be a surprise to anybody else that leadership, just like anything else you do in your business, it's going to play a huge role. And as CVO, you have to be the one carrying the flag and charging up the hill and leading the value creation of your company. So once I figure that out, reconfirmation.
Can I interject?
Sure.
Before you go to the second one. So just quickly on the first point. So I think the fact that you're phrasing this whole thing as reconfirmations of what you learned actually shows a great leadership trait, which is vulnerability. You talked about taking the hill and all that sort of stuff, leading, which I think is important. Are there other traits? So that's one that I really see with leaders. Are there any particular traits related to leadership? It's a big topic. Can you pick one or two traits before you get to reconfirmation number two?
Sure. Actually, it's a great lead into some of those reconfirmations, because one of the things that I found or reconfirmed was the role that communication plays in making sure that everybody in the organization understood. Actually, it's a couple steps down. So let me touch on it now, and then we'll reconfirm it a little more as we go on. But confirmation, everybody in the organization knowing where we're going, why we're going there, and how we're going to get there. Getting everybody rowing in the same direction was critical in getting this to happen, because what I walked into was a situation where my predecessor was not focused on value creation, and I had to flip the organization. So, leading them into this shift was the most difficult part of the job, but also created most of the reconfirmations that we're going to talk about today.
Okay, thank you.
So on to the second one. Once you have understood how important the leadership piece is, the second reconfirmation was that I found that you had to really convert yourself. You had to transform yourself. You had to not just say that you were the CVO, but transform yourself into that role. Again, I said that I had walked into a situation where my predecessor was not focused on value creation. And here I was coming in and saying, okay, I'm the CVO. We're going to move this company forward. We're going to create value. And this is how we're going to do it. I had to believe it. I had to be, not just say what I was doing. And my actions and my practices, I had to be aware of them all the time, that I was constantly moving us in the direction that I'd set out to do, and that I wasn't slipping back and not enabling my group or anybody in the organization to say, well, he said we're going in this direction, but we're not. So my total transformation into a CVO is what was reconfirmation number 2. It's something that I had been preaching to clients for years, and then I realized how important and how strong it was once I got in there. Okay, let's look at confirmation number 3. So where are we going? Man, if you asked me, Gary, about what some of the traits were. This is where this communication piece comes up. You have to continually communicate to the organization, because it's not a normal type of people are so focused, they're typically so focused on their jobs, on what has to happen tomorrow, what kind of value or what kind of profit we have to make next week, that we have to continually communicate the difference. Where are we going? We're going to have a strategic value vision that we're building. Where do we want to go? What's our destination and what's the route to get there? And then you have to communicate it. And you have to communicate it again and again and again. In every leadership meeting, in every company meeting, I communicated it. In every opportunity I had. If it went into our, we had an intranet, there were messages from me all the time about where are we going, how are we going to get there, what's the route that we're going to take, and even again in our company meetings, I would bring the conversation around to that so that I made sure that the team was communicating it back to me, so that we knew that it was sinking in. But communication isn't just the value vision; it's everything about the business. My reconfirmation here was that communication was critical, and you had to keep talking, and making sure that everybody in the organization was again rowing in the same direction. All right. Number 4, hold on tight and let it happen. So value creation requires investment. I said that you had to transition yourself into this position of CVO. Well, once you're the CVO, you have to make these decisions that you're going to spend the money that you need to spend to make this happen. If you believe in what you're doing, and you just have to do it. And when I talk about investment in this case, I'm not just talking about investing in capital and new equipment, although that's part of it. It's investing in the infrastructure of the business. Where and how are we going to get where we're going? And this is the reconfirmation that kind of separates the men maybe that's not the way to say it anymore, but it separates the doers from the non-doers in terms of you have to make investments, you have to spend the money, you have to build the right team, which is one of the other reconfirmations we'll talk about. and you have to invest in systems and processes and whatever it takes to make your company into a great company. And here's where you have to make it happen. You just have to grip the desk, pull out the checkbook, and make these things happen. Gary, you're being quiet.
Well, I'm monitoring the questions. I just saw one, and
Okay.
I wanted to touch on it if that's okay with you right now.
Sure.
Yeah. So, the question was, what percentage of leaders do you consider to be working at the CVO level, and what might trip them up? So that might be something you'll address later, but if you have some thoughts on it now.
Yeah, no, to give a percentage number is pretty tough, but what I found is that, and maybe it's a skewed view, is when I go into a business, the CEO understands that he has to be doing something different. He or she knows that it's not working, or the value isn't being created, something isn't there. So it's going before we talk about what we're going to be doing in the business. They may not be operating a CVO, but they want to operate a CVO, and they're open to the change. What I typically don't know, and why I can't really put a percentage on it, is the people who are not operating a CVO and aren't interested in operating as CVOs probably aren't going to call me up. So I don't ever see those people. But I would say that you could almost, businesses that have done really, really well, and businesses that have not done very well. And I think the basics for those are that the mindset and the perspective of the CEO is different. And the ones that are doing great are probably thinking more like a CVO. They're looking to build value in their business.
Once you said it like that, one thing that popped in my head was that it's maybe not just a steady state, I am or I am not, but to what extent am I consistently doing it over time? Because there's been some great companies that faltered.
Yes.
Blockbuster at one time was a great company, didn't stay there.
No.
But how did it consistently stay? So a chief value, being a value creator in the entrepreneurial arc, I think is probably more in your face than being a CVO in the maturity phase. Is that fair to say?
Say that again. Ask me that question again.
So I think that entrepreneurial drive, or the need to create value as a company grows, is very apparent for CEOs. But maybe is it harder to maintain as you get up the growth curve of a company? Things get a little steady or more set. Success might preclude you from being a CVO.
Yes, but it may not preclude your company from having a setback if you're not thinking like a CVO. So yes, right. I agree with you. As if the CEO is in there or the shareholders or owners of the company are in there to continually take cash out of the business and get comfortable, then yeah, the curve may start coming back down again from a value curve. So it's not a matter, I don't, when I look at a business, I don't look at only nor should a CEO or CVO look at a business only from the growth curve for revenue, for top line revenue. What I want to see is what's that value creation curve looking like? And, if we can keep that going, you get that comfort level, and yes, you're right, it starts to come back down. So yeah, it's a little more difficult to entice a established business, someone who has been successful in growing it to that point, to continue to go. But if the right mindset is there, the company can continue to go up. Now, obviously, sometimes this reconfirmation slide is going to separates us as well, because I may come into a business, say, this is what you're going to have to do to really create value in your business going forward. And then they realize that they're going to have to spend money. And maybe the excitement level goes down again. But those are usually not the strongest entrepreneurial owners at that point. So anyway,
there's one more question. Maybe you
Sure.
could just answer that quickly, and then we'll get on to the next one.
Sure.
What metric is used to measure value creation?
The typical metric if you're going to, I want to do this without taking up the whole 45 minutes that we have left. So typically, people think of value as what's the market value of my business? If I'm going to sell the business, what can I get for it? And typically the measure is a multiple of the company's EBITDA. So, maybe the multiple is a 5 or a 6. And people think of it and go, okay, I have to look at my current profit, my current EBITDA, and my last 2 years of EBITDA, and I take some kind of weighted average and I multiply times 5, and that's the value of my business. What I will show in future webinars that we have scheduled is situations where, by following the value creation in the right way, by using the CVO concept and mindset, we've taken companies that typically would sell for a multiple of 5 times their EBITDA and move that multiple up as high as 18 or 19. I mean, it doesn't happen all the time. But if you've got a truly great company, your value just goes off the charts if someone wants you bad enough. And what we talk about a lot of times is your value can be measured on how badly other companies want your company. You may not want to sell it. And value doesn't just focus on the sale. There's other reasons and rationales for building a strong, high value company. And we'll get into some of the details of that in a future webinar. But that's the typical measure, is it's a multiple of EBITDA in most companies, or in certain service businesses, there might be a different kind of a rule of thumb for coming up with value. But I look at value from a bigger picture. How great is this company? What separates us? Why is one company in a market worth more than another company?
Yeah,
it's
and
because
I think
it's
you have
a greater
the
company.
4 pillars that you talk about, which you'll go into more depth on.
I will, exactly. Not today, but we'll get there.
Good.
All right. So where do we make the first investment? Typically, reconfirmation number 5 said to me, you need to really invest in your leadership team. You're not going to be able to do this on your own. As CVO, you need a great team around you. You have to make some really hard decisions sometimes. You have to make sure you get the right team on board. You have to take the team you have and train them and invest in them. This is part of the infrastructure investment. Early on in my CEO time, I realized that we had an open spot in our business. We needed another position. And I went out and I brought somebody on board. It was a full salary and all the benefits that this company had never had before, in that it was a new position. And so it did affect our short-term profitability. But the payback on this position was something we had to do if we're looking at where our value vision is. I needed this position to be in the company. And the other thing that I found out, or reconfirmed, I should say, is something that I had preached to clients for many, many years. And that's, if you're looking for an A player, you can't pass on that A player just because it's a few dollars above what you think or budgeted for that position. It'll cost you more in the long run to take the C player at the right price rather than the A player with a little bit more salary. You're going to get the payback on that, as well as investing in your current team.
Yeah. Paradoxically, I think the more value that a company has, the cheaper it is to recruit.
It
So if you've
is.
invested in your company and they're attractive, there's other benefits besides trying to entice them just with a bigger paycheck or bigger bonus structure or things like that.
I think and maybe I'm saying something that I don't have a huge sample for, but I have found that people want to work for great companies. They want to work for exciting places. They want to work where the culture is right. And if you've invested in it, then you've got something that you can attract people with. And I like to think of letting the company catch up to my team versus trying to train the team along with me. I want people who've been there or done this, who've done it in bigger companies, but who have the right perspective. So investing in that team, making some hard decisions, moving some people out if you have to, but creating the best possible team that you can have. And then it doesn't stop there, because reconfirmation number 6 told me that, it goes beyond the leadership team. We couldn't just focus on the leadership team and ignore the rest of the company. We had to realize that our success was going to depend on the whole team. And one of the things that we tried very hard to do, and I think we succeeded in, was we tried to make the team feel like owners, because we believe that owners think differently. They take better care of what they're working on. They make decisions. We shared more information with them so that they could make better decisions and they could feel like owners and feel involved. We started to share more financial information. People who, it didn't matter where you were in the business. You were going to find out some financial information. You were going to be encouraged to think and act like an owner, like your name was on the door, so that when you came to work every day, you were proud of what you were doing, and you understood, again, going back to the communication piece, you understood where we were heading, how we were going to get there, and why we wanted to make that happen. So it's difficult sometimes for CEOs who are the owners of the business to understand or to deal with the idea that they're going to make everybody into. When I first say to a potential client or a client, well, let's make your employees into owners, the first thing that goes in their mind is giving them shares of stock. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about making them perform as owners would. And in doing so, making them a part of the team.
That kind of ties into engagement, which we'll talk about in another series. But basically, if you really want people to feel engaged, is give them, or empowered is a word that's bandied about, is that people need to feel that they have power over the quality and nature of their work.
That's right.
Ownership in my job. Doesn't have to be ownership in the company, but ownership in my job. And they take pride in
right.
that.
And to feel like when they come, the idea was similar to what you just said before in terms of recruiting the right leadership team. It goes all the way through the organization. If the feeling there is that you can become an owner, you can feel an owner, you're appreciated. It was easier to get other employees because we'd get referrals. Employees would refer friends to come to work because they were proud of what they were doing and where they were. So besides the leadership team, I keep hitting the wrong button. Prioritize the plan and the investments. This was reconfirmation number 7 for me. Setting this great value vision was easy. Here's where we want to be. Well, then we started looking at all the things that had to be done to get there. And it was overwhelming, and it can be overwhelming. And it took me back to some of the times when I would talk to a client and the team would be there and we'd come up with all these important things that had to be done in the company. Then I'd come back 2 months, 3 months later and find out that nothing had been done. No progress had been made. because the company just felt overwhelmed. They just said, it was like deer in the headlights. We got so many things to do. Where do we start? So once we've got this thing going, once we've set the value vision, and once we start to get moving in this, and we've decided these are all the things that have to get done, we have to prioritize them. I implemented what I call a rule of three. I don't think you can work on more than, no matter how big your company is, you can't work on more than three really important things at one time, because each important project has all kinds of tentacles, and everybody all of a sudden gets involved in everything. And then the next thing we know, no one's doing their day job. So how do we make improvements? How do we continuously improve the organization? How do we make sure that what we're doing is moving us in the right direction and going towards that value vision? Well, we got to set some priorities, and we have to force ourselves to limit it and move it back to something manageable. And
I love that idea, the rule of three. You see so many people, especially, I mean, it's what you want, but sometimes it can distract, as you want a highly motivated team, a bunch of high performers. But often, what they can do is they say, well, yeah, I can do that. Or if you go through and you got like 10 ideas, well, when can you do that? Oh, I can do that next week or this quarter. None of them likes to think next year. It's always like immediate, and they feel some compulsion.
That's
and
right.
then you get overcommit and some issues. So I love that rule of three.
Well, what I kind of reconfirmation 7.1, I guess, is that sometimes the worst offenders are the CEOs themselves, because I was the same way. I wanted everything. Why can't we do this all in 2.5 months? I mean, let's just get done with all this. Well, and then I come back in and not unlike other CEOs, come back in Monday morning and go, oh, I had another great idea. Let's do this. And you just keep shifting people. And, I've heard this so many times when I go into a company initially, and after talking to the CEO, then end up talking with all the leadership team members. And I've seen this so many times where the biggest complaint the leadership team has is, our CEO's a great guy. We love him. But if he doesn't stop chasing rabbits or shinies, or they've got all kinds of names for these things, that's what gets you off. You may have rule of three and you're working on 3 projects. And then I had to hold myself back from coming in on Monday and saying, help, let's change. I got something even better, because I had some time over the weekend to think about something new and exciting and different. And that's so that the CEO is a lot of the problem in these kind of situations.
Well, and you need a couple methodologies. One is you need to have a strategy that's easy to set and reset, and that's communicated well.
That's right.
People understand, why are we doing these 3 versus those 3? And everybody's got to follow the rules. So, yeah. So I noticed we've got another question. Do you want to
sure.
go on to the next one, or would you like to address it now?
We'll address it now. That's fine.
Okay. So this is, let me just read it. I am a CEO of a small business. It's just me, 3 direct reports and a small staff and a few departments. I still have much of the responsibility for sales. Can I still be a CBO, and how much of my time should be dedicated to that?
I think any business, I don't care how big you are. You could have 1 person and an assistant, or just 1 person. Your role as the CEO is to create value, because that, again, it's not just to sell your business, it's to create a great business. And in a situation like this, the percentage of time that you, from a perspective standpoint, from a front of mind standpoint, it should be 100% of your time thinking that way. It's how you think. It's not, people would ask us sometimes, so what size businesses do you work with? And we would set a certain limit. And they say, well, you don't work with big companies below that limit. Well, yeah, we do, if the company is thinking the right way. It's the perspective of the CEO and the business as to whether they should be, how they can be creating value. But if you have the right mindset, I don't care how small your business is, if you're thinking value, then you're going to make decisions the right way. You may not get as formal. You may not have to go into a rule of three. You may have to say, okay, there's only 3 of us. Here's what we can handle this year. Here's what the changes we're going to make. But we're still going to think innovatively. We're still going to think about the future. We're still going to think about what could trip us up in the future and bring our value down. Again, even a single person company should be thinking of those things, because one day something's going to happen, and if they haven't thought about it, if they haven't planned for it, their value could drop to 0, I guess.
Yeah, it's happened.
It has. Okay, let's go on to confirmation number 8. And it ties right into kind of the question that you asked, or someone asked. We talked at the last webinar about innovation, and part of what you talked about. And what I found or reconfirmed in my CEO time was that innovation was critical to creating value for this company. We had to continually innovate, not just in product, which we did, but in how we did everything, how our processes worked, how we treated people, how we worked the company, how we talked to customers, how we sold. Everything there was an innovation mindset that had to be there all the time to make this place great. And we kind of followed Jeff Bezos's advice, which was, if you know, he said that Amazon is the best place in the world to fail at. So the rule of thumb at our company was, if you're not failing enough, you're not innovating enough. If you're being so cautious that you never fail, then you're not moving forward fast enough or innovatively enough, if that's a word. This was a difficult thing to do. There was a lot of resistance and a lot of maybe misunderstanding is the word, as far as how do you do this? How do you get people to think, man, I've been taught my whole life that I'm not supposed to fail. And, it was funny. We had a lot of engineers, and it was the most difficult group to get to think this way was our engineering group. And they were the most important from an innovation standpoint for products, because they were taught, don't fail, make it perfect. And we want perfection. We're just not going to get there. It's just not going to happen. So we had to continually reinforce the idea that it's okay to fail. And assuming you're failing because you're trying new things, because you're innovating, because you're again, similar to the whole idea of being a CBO, you're changing a mindset. And to me, that's the most difficult things to do. And that's where some companies need to call Gary in to help them change that mindset, because some of us are not, we know what we want to get accomplished, but we're not psychologists, and sometimes it's difficult to get that final change in your brain waves to happen.
At least kind of discerning is like, am I simply solving problems to get back to a baseline, or am I trying to improve my condition?
That's right.
The processes are different.
Yep. And if you're the CVO, you have to be thinking about, again, growth this way in terms of value. You can't say, well, let's just fix this and we'll do the same thing. Let's do it a little bit better. Yep. Well, yeah, you're going to get a little higher value, but if you can think ways to do it really better, then you can really move into something exciting. You mentioned the Blockbuster situation. And I just received an email this morning that had some interesting things in it. And it said that, I didn't realize this, but in the year 2000, the CEO of Blockbuster had an opportunity to buy Netflix for $50 million. And he turned it down. Well, you know what happened in 2010 when Blockbuster went belly up, but the idea of taking those chances, of taking those risks to say, how does that future look to us? Are people going to continue to rent these things, or is online streaming going to change? What kind of thinking do we have to keep us moving forward? That's the CVO mindset. Is what's around the corner, not what can I see? What are the things that I can't see? Where can we innovate? Where can we try something new and maybe fail at it? You know, I talk about the Bezos thing. Go on Amazon and type in Amazon Explore, or just do it as a Google. Mm-hmm. And Amazon just came up with another new idea it's a beta right now, and you can get onto the beta site. I don't want to go into all the details of what they're doing, but it's just one more way that they're following Bezos's advice, which is, I'm thinking way out. I'm not just thinking short term.
Yeah.
All right. Enough commercials for Amazon. Keep your eye on the prize. What I've found with talking to clients over years was it's really difficult. They were telling me that it was really difficult to keep their focus on the vision because they had so much work to do all day, and they were always buried in stuff, and they were always trying to get things done, and there were crises coming up one after another. What I reconfirmed was, as CEO, as CVO, it is difficult. You have to really work at keeping your eye on the vision and the future, as opposed to what's happening today. Who's complaining today? What customer problems do we have today? We have to make it the metric of the company. The core metric of the company has to be this vision creation, this value creation. Mm-hmm. As Covey said, begin with the end in mind. Every day, we always talked about it. We always looked at are we any closer to this prize? The team, on a weekly basis, if you sit down with your team, your leadership team, ask that question. How close have we made any progress towards this vision that we've all got? We know we've had issues this week. We know some of you are really snowed in and working on major problems with a customer or a product or whatever. But have we made any headway in getting towards our vision? And I think that's something that, as CVO, that has to be, that when I say it's your number one job, that's part of it, is really staying focused on what that future vision is and making sure that everybody doesn't get off track and we lose it.
What did you find in your experience helped keep that focus and keep on track? I see with my clients, time mastery is like one of the big issues for the executive and the executive team.
Well, I can tell you from experience, it affects the CEO as well. Time mastery is a tough thing. You just have to, again, what I found from a people standpoint or a team standpoint was this continuous communication of trying to understand that the real prize was the vision, and that depending on the position in the company and what level you're at and what your job was, it changed what percentage of your time you would be spending on specific vision type projects. Some of those rule of three projects that we were working on, so you may, as the director of a area, spend much more time on that than somebody who's doing more of a day-to-day work. Mm-hmm. But everybody had to be involved, and the communication had to be there. And so we We talked about it again, like I mentioned on the communication thing, we talked about it at every weekly leadership meeting. The leadership teams talked about it in their team meetings, and we talked about it in our monthly company meetings. Where are we heading? What's our goal? Why are we doing this? It's that whole understanding piece. But this is part of this, or a lot of this is directed towards the CBO themselves to continually keep their focus on that vision. Okay. I think we're doing okay on time. We should be okay.
We've got 15 minutes. Yeah.
Reconfirmation number 10. Little story. Years ago, I got together in a group and we started doing Sunday morning bike rides, bicycle rides. And was riding, one of the early times riding with a fellow who had been riding for many more years than I have. And we were riding together and he said to me, you know, Joel, it's not a matter of if you're going to fall off this bike. It's a matter of when. And when you do, he says, I'll tell you from experience, the only way to do it is, you know, get up, stop the bleeding wherever it is, get the road rash off and get back on this bike and ride again. So you have to apply that same principle to value creation. There's going to be setbacks. You're going to try things, just like the failure thing I talked about. You're going to try things. You're going to move forward. You're going to invest a lot of money. It's not going to work. And I had a client once that was really successful. In 10 years, they grew from $15 million to their value goal, which was $100 million sales, and to sell their company for ungodly amount of money. And they had it, they were there, they were investing. The CEO was definitely a CVO, and they tried something. They came up with a new product into a new area that it was related, but not 100%. It was part of their competency, but it went out of their market range a little bit. They invested a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of effort, and it didn't work. Customers didn't like it, and they took it off the market. I was watching to see, I was ready to say, to get in there and do my pep talk that, you know what, it's okay. But they understood the CVO concept and the value creation concept enough to say, you know what, didn't work. We blew a lot of money, but we're ready to go and we're going to do it again. Let's find the next area that we can move into. Because if we're going to make our $100 million goal, we got to keep this going. We can't let one setback do it. So the trick is to get back up, brush yourself off, and keep going. And really, again, you got the CVO's role is to make sure that we do it again, but then to rally the troops, because there's going to be a lot of disappointed people that say, see, we tried something new, it didn't work. Why are we doing this anymore? So the CVO's role is to make sure that everybody else is getting up, not just themselves. So yeah, if not when, it's not if, it's when, and it will happen. So don't get disappointed.
And sometimes the directors or whoever's got that particular project will be harder on themselves than the CEO might, and they kind of beat themselves up. So
yeah, and you've got to get them back.
To give them that longer term view, just the one you're describing.
Right, you just got to bring them back and say, okay, so it didn't work. It's not your fault. We did it as a team. We made this decision as a team, and we're going to have to reshift. And you know, to use Bezos's, again, a quote of his is that he used to say that he's always right because he can change his mind. Well, we got to change our mind in this, so and go the right way. All right, number 11, protect the brand. When I talk about a brand, I'm not talking about, you know, the Heinz ketchup. It's not that kind. I know most of the people, in fact, probably all the people listening to this are not making consumer products. And if you are, that's different. But it's the brand. The brand to me is what people think about when they say the name of your company. What is it How does it operate? What do your employees think of your company? Is it service? Is it quality? Is it a great place to work? Whatever. Your brand to you should be like gold. You have to keep polishing it. You have to protect it, most importantly. You have to invest in it. And then you have to put it away and make sure that no one damages it. Because as you're trying to move forward and as you're trying to create value in your business and you take more chances and you fail a couple times, you have to make sure that it's not affecting your brand. And as you continue to build your infrastructure, how does that affect your brand? You have to continually be, again, as a CVO, looking at this brand, checking it out every couple days and saying, yeah, it's still in the safe. It's still working well. Nobody's damaged it. And because the brand, to me, if we do certain things in businesses, we can fix them fairly easily. The brand is something that once you're invested in it and once you have it, once it gets, if it gets damaged, the investment to rebrand, to bring it back up to where you want it to be is difficult, if not in some cases impossible. There's stories forever about even large companies damaging their brand and not being able to really recover from it fully.
Yeah, and it doesn't take like a Tylenol scare thing to damage it. It's to be as simple as how people pick up the phone.
Exactly.
It could be the person who makes the least amount of money in your company can have the biggest impact on your brand.
Well, and it can also tie to what we talked about in the last webinar when you talked about innovation and when I talked about failure. If your brand is to be the front of the pack in terms of technology or service or whatever, those are the kind of things that if you're not continually investing in it, if you're not, if you say, you know what, we're not going to come up with that next level of product or service because I don't want to spend the money, because I need to show profit next month or next quarter or next year. Well, that damages your brand. There has to be an investment process for your brand.
Yeah, people will notice. I just want to also notice we've got about 8 minutes. So
okay, I got one more confirmation and then we're in good shape. And sometimes from a leadership standpoint, I think this last confirmation could be one of the most important. You need to see it as half full. If you're a CVO, if you're going to be a CVO, one of the prerequisites, I believe, is optimism. Now, that doesn't mean it's unrealistic optimism. That means it's realistic optimism, but you have to believe it's possible. I'm sure that some of the people listening to this can relate to this, but I had when I inherited my leadership team, when I took over as CEO, I had one person on the team that quickly earned the title of Chicken Little. To him, the sky was always falling. What do you mean we're going to do that? Well, we can't do that. We can't get that done. Every single leadership team meeting that we went into, we heard that from this guy. It was almost this big groan that came from the rest of the leadership team. And then this leader would then go back out and talk to other people in the company. And they were listening to a leader of the company and they were getting pessimistic as well. So we had to remove that Chicken Little. We made a rule, no more Chicken Littles in this company. If you realistically know that something's a bad idea, let's talk about it. Let's figure out what it is, because we don't want to believe in impossible things. We want to believe in possible things, but we want to take it and run with it. As if you came out and said, look, we're not going to be successful with this, but let's do it anyway, you're not going to get too many people to follow you. As Robert Iger, the CEO from Disney, wrote a book. If you're looking for a great book, he wrote a great book called What a Ride. And it talks about his years in ABC and Disney, and one of his best lines, I think, in the book was that nobody wants to follow a pessimist. So how do you lead with being a pessimist? Well, let's go after let's charge this hill. There's enemy up there. We'll probably all be killed, but let's do it. That's not the way we want to lead this value charge. We need to see it as half full. And I honestly don't see too many CVOs who are pessimists, because otherwise they wouldn't have called me to work with them. So when I go into a business, most of the CEOs who are willing to change to be a CVO are pretty optimistic that they can make this happen. Even ones that have setbacks and are getting up and dusting themselves off are pretty optimistic that they can make it happen. What we have to balance here is over-optimism versus being optimistic.
You brought up an excellent point. If there's a lack of courage or whatever that negative feeling was, it is contagious. So nipping it in the bud.
It is. And you know what? I made the same mistake that many CEOs, CVOs make. Sometimes we wait a little too long to remove that from our business. For every day that Chicken Little was in the business, the value was affected. Yeah.
Excellent.
So those are the 12 of them. CEO to CVO, the leadership piece is critical. You got to believe in the role. You got to be talking to people constantly and telling them where we're going and how we're going to get there and why we're going there. Then you got to let it happen by spending the money and investing. You have to create the greatest leadership team that you can possibly create. You need to get the rest of the organization involved in this process and rowing in the right direction. Prioritize. You have to look at failure and encourage it. Keep the vision out there. Make sure that setbacks don't stop you. Protect your brand with everything you have, and then stay optimistic. So I think we're getting close. Do we have any more time for questions?
I think we're about close there. I would just note I've got a whole page of notes here.
Okay.
A lot of things that I saw. I really learned a lot from here, and I would encourage others, if they have any questions, send those to me or Joel.
Yep, do that, please. Let me just a little pitch here. Got a new book coming out pretty soon about this whole process of CEO to CVO. If you go to the website, chiefvalueofficers.com, you can get on a list to at least get notified when the book comes out. So I would encourage you to do that. And if you want to reach any of us, here's our contact info. Steve, thank you again for your sponsorship. And if Alex and Christy are around, thank them. And you can register for future events at I guess
that URL.
For the website, yeah.
URL, yeah. But if you go to if you go to Gary's website, you can register without writing all that other stuff down.
And I do want to highlight, especially to pick up on your theme of optimism, a week from Thursday, October 15th at 8 a.m. at Gainey Ranch here in Scottsdale, Gary Covert and I are presenting Reset, Rethink, Relaunch. This is a live event. It's part of this series, but we're actually going to have a live event a week from Thursday to prepare our minds for 2021. As an investment professional, I see tremendous opportunity for businesses next year. And Gary's going to talk about collaborating and teams and how important that is, building upon the innovation and the chief value work that we talked about today. I'm going to talk about the economy and the markets and where we see business opportunities for 2021. So we really hope you'll come in person. If there are other senior leaders that you know that could benefit, please invite them as well and register in advance. And then, of course, we'll pick up again with the webinars on October 27th. So again, thank you, Gary. Thank you, Joel, especially, and to all of you who participated today. We hope you have a good rest of the day. Thanks.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.